Hello and welcome to our London History Podcast, where we share our love of London, its people, places and history. It's designed for you to learn things about London that most Londoners don't even know. I am your host, Hazel Baker, qualified London tour guide and CEO and founder of londonguidedwalks.co.uk. Each episode is supported by show notes, transcripts, photos and further reading, sometimes even videos, all to be found on our website londonguidedwalks.co.uk/podcast and then select the episode that you fancy. If you enjoy what we do, then you will love our guided walks and private tours that we offer throughout the year. Joining me in the studio today is Luke Honey, a writer and antique specialist who has a regular column with Homes and Antiques. He's also one of the founders of the London Gasketeers. Hello, Luke.
Hi there. Hello. Thank you very much for having me today.
Not at all. I mean, the wonderful gas lamps in London, they're so iconic. I mean, I even have them on the artwork of my own podcast. So this is something, people consider it to be street furniture and other people don't even consider them at all because they're just there. However, that is at risk, isn't it?
It's a serious risk, yeah. It's a serious risk. I think the thing is that we all go around our daily lives, don't we, in London? We're all terribly busy and we rush here and there. And I'm very keen on the idea of people just spending 3 or 4 minutes or a minute of their day, on the way to the tube or whatever, to just look around them. And London has so much history, which... when you start looking around, it's for everybody and it doesn't cost anything. With the gas lamps, I mean, we'll talk more about this obviously in a minute, but I've had so many people get in touch with me say, do you know what, I didn't realise that London still has gas lamps. And the answer is yes, we do. But if our campaign doesn't succeed, certainly in Westminster, there will be no gas lamps in possibly 3 months' time. Or, again, we can talk about this later, there may be half the number of gas lamps that we've already got at the moment. In London, there are about 1,500 gas lamps left. And they're in 3 specific areas. So they're in the royal parks, which, again, everybody will know. We're talking about the Mall. Actually, if you go to the Mall, if you walk down the Mall towards Buckingham Palace, one side of the Mall is gas, and the other side the right-hand side is gas, and the side on the left is electricity. And then you've got St James's Park and Hyde Park, places like that, which have gas lamps. And they're controlled by the royal parks. We have gas lamps in the City of London, in the Temple, where, of course, as you know, all the barracks have their chambers. And that is still lit by gas, but that is under the authority of the City of London Corporation. And the remaining lamps are in the City of Westminster. So when we talk about Westminster, again, this confuses people. So you immediately start thinking of Westminster Abbey, don't you? And when people say Westminster, they say you think of Westminster Abbey and Big Ben and things like that. But the City of Westminster is actually a very big borough, and it goes right up to places like Paddington, and then it goes right across to Temple Bar, where it then joins with the city. So it's a fairly big place. Within Westminster, the 3 gas lamp clusters are Covent Garden, which you said earlier. And if you want to see gas lamps, it's probably the best place to go and have a look at them. In the alleyways and the streets off the Piazza. And then in St James's, which is where all the grand old clubs are and the art dealers and people like that, down near St James's Palace. And there are gas lamps in Carlton House Terrace and also Carlton Gardens, which is a really charming square, which I recommend everybody to go and have a look at, which is completely lit by gas. There used to be gas lamps in Crown Passage and Pickering Place. Unfortunately, those have been removed by the council already and replaced with reproductions, which we are very sad about. And there used to be gas lamps off Jermyn Street in the little alleyways. And there was a charming alleyway called Eagle Place. And that was lit by gas, and that has been redeveloped. It used to be near a very famous hat shop called Bates. And that redeveloped a few years ago, and I'm afraid the gas lamps have been lost there. And then the last area to go and look at them is down near Smith Square. So there are all these Georgian houses. And it's very famous, a lot of politicians live there. It's within the Division Bell. But they are lit by gaslight. And Although the houses in Georgian, the gas lights there are probably from about 1910. But if you go to these streets, it is how you would have seen the street in 1910. It hasn't changed since then, apart from perhaps the colour of the windows, which probably would have been painted green in that period and now white. But apart from that, so it is living history. It is in action. I'm afraid those lamps are under threat, and again, if the council get their way, those will go and be replaced by reproductions.
It's strange, isn't it? Because these are also places that are really popular with film production companies.
Mary Poppins Returns. I mean, that was shot in I think it was Lord North Street, or certainly a street very close to Lord North Street, down off St Smith Square, and they're used by film. In fact, I've been contacted by film production people saying, we love the gas lamps because we use these streets the whole time. So, and again, of course, tourists. I mean, so Goodwin's Court, which is everybody knows, which is possibly linked with Harry Potter, maybe not, but it's the most lovely, beautiful sort of secret place between St Martin's Lane and it's in Bedfordbury, isn't it? And it's 17th century alleyway. Nell Gwyn is supposed to live there. It's got 3 historic gas lamps. It's just a fantastic place. Everybody goes there. The tourists love it. And if those lamps are replaced, I mean, it would be such a tragedy, I think.
Yeah, it boggles my mind, really, because there's something that evoke a wonderful character to the area. I lived in Covent Garden for over 5 years and would walk around the streets of London. Sounds a bit dodgy, I know, but walk around and enjoy those smaller streets in the dark, enjoying that light. It wraps around you, doesn't it?
They're absolutely wonderful. So the thing about the gas light, I mean, where do we start? So, and again, later on, we can perhaps talk about exactly what these gas lamps are and how old they are and how they work. But if we actually talk about the light, it's a very distinctive. When gaslight was invented, it was supposed to replicate sunlight. That was the point. So it's a very, very natural light which your eyes get adjusted to in a very easy way. I mean, a great friend of mine who's a brilliant photographer. We were photographing the lights of Covent Garden, and he knows a lot more about light than I do. He's a photographer, and he said, the light is absolutely fantastic. It doesn't hurt your eyes. It doesn't pixelate through the camera. It's just a really, really clean, beautiful light. It's also, I have to stress, extremely good for wildlife. So creepy crawlers, insects, bats, moths, they like gaslight. It's a good thing for wildlife in London. So that's another reason why we're very pro it. The other question I ask people is, we live here, we have a bedroom on the street. And I say to people, would you rather have a gas light directly outside, or would you rather have an LED light shining into your bedroom? And I've had some very interesting responses to that.
Yeah, I bet. And how many of these gas lamps are maintained by British Gas?
Okay, so we talked about 1,500 lights in London. So in Westminster, we think there are about 275 gas lamps left. Councils say a bit more. The council is saying about 300. We actually think 30 have been removed already. So we are thinking about 275, something like that. And they're maintained by a lovely bunch of guys, the lamp lighters. I mean, they're the nicest bunch of... We've been down to British Gas Depot, and had coffee with them and seen their spares and looked at their stuff. Nicest people, very skilled. They know exactly what they're doing. They absolutely love their lamps. And I also love the idea that, they're driving around London and everybody knows them, and people wave at them, I must stress that they're called the lamplighters because it goes back to, I think they were founded in 1813 when people went round and lit the lamps. So this is something I need to talk about now. So if you don't know very much about gas lamps, you assume that, a chap comes around with a pole and lights them. And I think actually in the Temple until fairly recently they used to do that. But the Westminster ones are on automatic ignition. So half the gas lamps are on electronic ignition. So literally at this time of year, it's about 5 o'clock, isn't it? So 5 o'clock, the electric ignition will come on and the lamp will start up. And the other half are on clockwork ignition. So they're these incredibly well-made Swiss mechanisms which have to be wound up every 2 weeks. So that sounds laborious, but I mean, having spoken to the British Gas guys, they said, well, actually, to be honest with you, the clockwork is more efficient than electronic ignition because it's so well made that it doesn't go wrong. So although we do have to go around and wind them up every 2 weeks, they just go on and on. I mean, and I've actually got one on my desk. I mean, it's beautiful quality. I think made in Switzerland. And don't, by the way, think that they're hundreds of years old. They're not. I mean, they carried on making them until whenever. But they're just saying that in a way that actually, although they could all be converted to electronic ignition if that was needed. But in a way, the clockworks work beautifully. So why not keep that? And also, it's green. I mean, you can't get greener than a Hellman's mechanism. So I hope that sort of clears it up for people, because a lot of people just still assume people go around with which they don't.
And how can you tell whether there's one that's electrically ignited or that's a wind-up?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I want everybody to start going around looking at gas lamps. And by the way, do, because you may only have 2 months left to do it in Westminster, if we don't persuade the council. So the clockwork mechanism is a sort of circular brass box, is the best way of putting it, which you'll see in the lantern. It's like a sort of brass. Sometimes they're painted black, sometimes they're brass, but it's like a sort of circular brass metal container. And then inside that is a mechanism. Again, the world of gas lamps is slightly complicated. There are sort of roughly three types of gas lamps in London. There's a Rochester, which is the one you'll see. I love that. It's one of my favourite gas lamps. It's one which it's a tall, elegant thing with a sort of top looks a bit like an Edwardian lady's hat. And then it's got broad iron scrolls underneath it. And those date from about the late 19th century, early 20th century. And it was a very, very clever design. So what they did was essentially they inverted the mantle, which is the little bulbs where the gas is burnt, and so that the light shines down onto the street, which was a clever idea. And then the clockwork mechanism is still there, but it's actually in a box within the pole. So it's a very, very clever design. You then got the Grosvenor, which is the one you see in the parks, and that's the one with all the sort of detailing on it, and sometimes in the parks they're gilded. The Windsor, which I really love, which is the classic sort of Dickensian lantern. Why I'm particularly keen on those, if you go and walk around the alleyways of Covent Gardens, down near the Garrick Club, the Rose and Flag, there's a lovely pub down there. And there's an alleyway just behind it. And again, these alleyways tend to have these Windsors, as there were in Pickering Place. And there's a variation on design because they tend to be longer, quite long, and they have sort of lovely detailing, like little sort of Grecian brackets on the top. And unfortunately, the council's replicas are just sort of generic. They don't feature these things, and they don't also replicate the shape. So with these three lanterns, there are variations on all of these lanterns, and some of them have these. I mean, another one I can mention is incredibly rare. There's something called a passage lamp, and that was designed for Victorian London in the 1880s. We think there's maybe only one left now. It's a sort of bracket lantern that was attached to the wall, and it had a reflector behind it to increase the light. Then it had a thin like a spike on top. And again, with lovely sort of Grecian decoration. And these would have gone up in 1890s in Victorian passageways and alleyways to light. And they were designed specifically for London. We think there is only one left now in St James's. There used to be one in Crown Passage, and I'm afraid that has been removed by the council and replaced with a sort of, I think it's like a Windsor with the top taken off, which doesn't look anything like it. So one of our problems with the council's plan, which they want to basically take out all the gas lanterns and replace them with reproductions with LED light inside, is that they keep saying it's going to be like for like, and you won't be able to tell the difference. And the trouble is, we've seen the new lanterns, and there are some substantial differences, particularly also to the Windsors, which in the alleyways, I mean, if they're ripped out, the replacements, I'm afraid, do not look like the originals. So it's a sort of variety which is going, just replaced by sort of homogenised 3 standard patterns, which I'm very, very sad about.
I didn't know about those passage ones. That's brand new to me.
Only because you've probably never seen. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, there was one in Crown Passage. It's incredibly rare. It's gone, just gone. Unfortunately, it wasn't listed. And again, I was speaking to the British Gas people, and they said, "Well, we think that's probably the last one. There might be 1 or 2 others, but I mean, I haven't seen any." So
no.
So I was very, very sad about that. And it's another reason, why we are so sort of determined to persuade the council to change their views. Let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned about there's different ages of these street lamps, with Smith Square being 1910. What's the oldest gas lamp that we've got in Westminster?
So again, we need to sort of correct some misconceptions here. So the thing to understand about gas lamps, and again, the council just don't seem to understand this at all. So it's not a question of this lamp's 100 years old, this lamp's 200 years old. The point is that the poles are often sometimes older. So if you go down to Carlton Gardens, which is that lovely little square, which I recommend everybody go at. I mean, the poles there are George IV, so they're really early. But they've got Windsors on the top of them. Or Grosvenors from memory, I can't remember. I think they're possibly Grosvenors on the top. But then the Grosvenors might date from 1890 or something like that. The other thing to understand is that they carried on making the patterns. So you might see a Grosvenor and think, oh, that looks really Victorian. But it may have been made in 1930 because they were carrying on making the patterns. And then the other thing to understand is that the British gas team go and maintain them. So quite often you might have a pole which is 1850 or something, a top which looks 1890 but probably 1930s, and then you might actually have the operating system inside which was only updated 10 years ago or something, because they're always maintaining them. And then they might have put an electric ignition 3 years ago. So, a lorry might have driven into the side, particularly of the Rochesters, and damaged the lantern, and then they may have replaced half of it. So they're working things. So they're not preserved in aspic, and that's what we're trying to get across. I mean, and some of them are. So the ones in Pickering Place, which were removed, we think dated from 1890, and we've got photographs, and we think they were actually original from that period. The Grosvenors in Goodwin's Court are probably 1910, maybe earlier, 1900. But it's quite hard to be very specific about it. And then again, if you look at those ones, the mantles are replaced on a regular basis. The mantles, by the way, again, so if we go back to that Mary Poppins film, Mary Poppins Returns, yeah. Do you remember the good old Hollywood? So the gas lamps there have a sort of open flame. And you probably don't. We have an open flame, which is actually not. They did have open flame gas in London, but by the late 19th century, they'd invented the mantle systems, which was much, much more efficient. So again, that's something we need to get across. This idea about emissions, this idea that gas lamps are sort of like the burner on your stove. It just ain't true. Spewing lots of stuff out. They're very efficient and very tightly controlled. So the gas goes up the pipe, and then it goes into your little, like 4 little glass bulbs, or sometimes they're more. And then there's a sort of silk mesh, which is dipped in chemicals, and then the gas ignites, and it burns in a very, very efficient way. It's a bit in a way like a light bulb burning inside the thing. It was a clever invention. That way they made the gas lamps much, much more efficient. So there are very few open flame gas lamps left in London. I think there's one outside Albany and Piccadilly. There is one outside the National Gallery. Mm-hmm. But again, that was put in the 1980s, we think. So, and made by Sugg, who's a very famous company that made all the gas lamps. So London gas lamps are going to be mantle burners. And they're efficient.
And do we know where the first gas lamps were in London?
We do. So the very first gas lighting, I think, also in the world, street gas lighting was in Pall Mall in 1807. And so there was a gentleman called Frederick Windsor, and if you, again, as a guide, you'll notice if you walk down Pall Mall, on the right-hand side, isn't there, there's a plaque up. Then on one of the clubs, can't remember which one it is, the RAC or something, there's a plaque there. So it was the first time they actually had gas, and I think the gas went through wooden pipes. And then there were cartoonists like Gilray and people like that who did cartoons of people being terrified by the new gas lamps. And that was the first place, which again makes it so sad about Crown Passage, because where the gas lamps were removed from Crown Passage were it was literally where gas lighting in the world was born. Only yards away from it, and these lamps were ripped out and replaced by the LED lights. So that's particularly ironic, I think. But yeah, that's where it was. So again, it's in London's history. It's part of London's fabric. This is where gas lighting was first demonstrated to the world.
And then, of course, Paris benefited afterwards.
Yes, that's right.
And what are your favourite gas lamps?
Yeah, and actually I'm almost getting to the stage now where I actually have a particular favourite one. It sounds really sad, but I mean, we've been looking at gas lamps so much now. So I like the Rochesters, because I think these are the ones I talked about earlier. So if you go to Cecil Court, outside Tim Bryer's bookshop, there's the most beautiful Rochester with lovely scroll work. It looks like something from a Ronald Searle cartoon. It's just got that elegance of that almost sort of end-of-century Art Nouveau-y elegance about it. And I think it's a classic London lamp. So funnily enough, I'm a film buff, so I was watching The Blue Lamp with Dirk Bogarde, which was shot, I think, in 1949, and it was filmed in Little Venice. I hadn't seen the film before, and there were masses of gas lamps all over Little Venice, down by the canal, Blomfield Road, places like that. And they were all Rochesters, so they all would have gone probably in the 1960s, I would have thought. So that was fun. But I'm also very keen on and we mentioned the passage lamp, and I'm very keen on that because we think there's only one left. I'm also very keen on the Windsors, which you find down the alleyways. So these sort of particularly deep lanterns, very Dickensian, how you imagine Victorian London. And again, they're getting quite rare. I just have a theory that maybe why some of these survived the Blitz was because they were down passageways. So when the bombs, because many of the Rochesters were actually destroyed during the war in the Blitz and then replaced after the war. But some of these lamps, I think, down the back, the passageways and in the little squares may have been shielded to some extent from bomb damage. It's just a theory I have. But again, if we lose those, that would be so sad. I just can't. It's just, and then as a tour guide, taking people around who've come to London to soak up its history and walk down an alleyway and, that's a reproduction. I just think it's very, very sad.
Yeah, I agree. And we do get people asking where the best place to walk and enjoy the gas lamps. They want to invoke a time gone by, and gas lamps is one of the perfect ways of doing that.
Yeah, Covent Garden is a great place to look at it. The other thing also about Covent Garden, of course, is masses of electricity and all sorts of things going on. I think if you're a purist, the streets like Lord North Street and Gayfair Street down by Smith Square, because you are literally looking at a street how it would have been in 1910. They're Rochesters down there. So you've got the Georgian buildings. And I said as I said earlier, and apart from the colour of the front doors and the windows, which I suspect probably would have been a sort of bronze dark green rather than white. But apart from that, it is like going into a complete time warp. But I must also stress that, the lamps work perfectly well. So this idea that, they're all falling to bits is just not true. I'm walking these streets, they're all working absolutely fine. Why
are we seeing fewer gas lamps on the streets now? What's happening?
Well, a lot of them were taken, so that we got the 275 left in Westminster. A lot of them were removed, weren't they, in the 1960s? So that sort of era, wasn't there, with great modernisation and redevelopment in the 1960s. And huge parts of London were knocked down and rebuilt in the 1960s. I think by the 1930s it was about sort of half and half in London. So 50% were gas and 50% were electricity. Look, we're not as campaigners. We're we're realistic. We're not saying let's put gas everywhere across London. Of course we're not. But all we're just saying is that these lamps are so few left now in Westminster, and they're in very sensitive historic areas. To lose them, to take out a gas lamp only yards from St James's Palace or in Goodwin's Court or all those lovely streets, is just, particularly when this country is known for its history and its heritage and its arts, and I just think it's so sad.
And what's happening to them when they're being removed?
Good question. I don't know. We just don't know. And I'm not saying, we don't know, but we do have the photographs of some of them just being taken away on a cart. Two lovely old Grosvenors. I think that was from Martlet Court. We have a photograph, just being chucked onto the back of the lorry and removed. So we just don't know what's going on, what's happening to them.
And what's the argument for replacing the gas lamps?
Okay, so the council are absolutely hell bent on doing it. So what they want to do, they want to just to be transparent about it, so everybody knows what's happening. So they're keeping the poles. Yeah, so they want to keep the poles. And they're going to take the lantern off, which is the top bit, and then replace the lantern with a reproduction with LED lighting inside the repro. So that's what they're doing. They're not planning to remove the whole thing. But in the case, obviously, of the ones attached to the walls, the whole thing, I'm afraid, is going. And I'm afraid also the brackets, which, again, I'm really upset about. So, like one at Pickering Place, there was a lovely, just very simple bracket that's been replaced with something completely different, not like for like. And the Crown Passage one, again, that's gone. So my lovely Windsors, which I like in these back alleyways, they will just be completely gone. In the case, obviously, of the listed, so again, we talk about the listing. So half of the lamps are listed, about that, maybe a bit more. 140 lamps, 150 lamps, something like that are listed. So the council do intend to change those as well. But to do that, they need to negotiate with Historic England to be allowed to do that. So, I can't comment on that. That is a matter between Historic England and the council. But they have made it clear that they want to also convert the listed ones as well. They have made that very clear.
I've got something in the back of my mind about the Covent Garden Piazza when that was designed. That it was actually from the architect's specific request to use gas lamps, and they got a special dispensation for that.
Yes, I think you're right. I think that's absolutely right. As part of the redevelopment. Because, of course, the other thing, as you know, was that Covent Garden, they were going to put a motorway right through the middle of Covent. The whole of Covent Garden in the 1970s was going to be flattened. And they were going to drive the motorway right through the middle of it. And thank God, I love, you used to live there, and I love to live in Covent Garden. I think it's a wonderful place. And thank God that a whole load of quite sort of tough protesters went out on the streets and stopped it happening. I've had a few people saying, well, this is a first world problem and there are more important things to worry about, the gas lamps. But I would just say, well, if you'd had that, in the 1970s with Covent Garden, there was Vietnam War, oil crisis, all sorts of terrible things going on in the 70s, particularly in the economy. And yet people did save it. And I'm really glad that they did, because if they hadn't, that area would have been just completely flattened and motorway through the middle and all sorts of redevelopment. And it's an amazing bit of London. I absolutely love it. And the architecture is fantastic and people love it. It's also brilliant for the tourists, isn't it? It's just... It's one of the gems that we have in London. The gas lamps were then saved by people like Dan Cruikshank in the 1970s, along with the Covent Garden plan to save Covent Garden. And it was about 1974, I think. So Cruikshank was involved then with it, and he's now helping us with the campaign. And it's just sad for him that having saved it, he's got to now try and save it all over again. But at the time, then there was a period afterwards in the 1980s where I think the council then thought the gas lamps were very much an asset to the area. But going back to the reason why they're doing it, so the council, they're talking about emissions, which again, I need to really get the facts right about this. So obviously, we have a climate emergency and we're all green, we all want to do our best. But the thing I have to stress is that the actual emissions that come off a gas lamp are absolutely tiny. So we have a statistic of 0.0008% of Westminster's overall emissions. It's certainly under 1%. It's absolutely minimal. People go around and say, we've got to save, get these gas lamps are emitting. They're not. Yes, they are emitting something. That's true, but it's a very, very, very small amount. So that's point number one. The second point is the carbon footprint. Obviously, we're arguing that if you just leave things alone, it's obviously better for the carbon footprint than if you have to manufacture things and put in electricity and make, and the lorries have to come and So that's... and we're also arguing again that from an environmental point of view, as I said earlier, that the gaslight is extremely good for insects and biodiversity and natural sleep patterns. And again, I know if I was living in Covent Garden, I'd much rather have a gas lamp outside my bedroom than an LED light. However, even though LED lights are improving, I'll be honest about that, they are a lot better than they used to be, but I still would rather have the gas lamp. So it's very, very good for, we like the creepy crawlies. We want that. We want to encourage that. The second argument the council are coming up with, which I think frankly is absurd, I will say that, is the public safety argument. So they're saying that the gas lights don't emit enough light and therefore people will walk in fear in the streets. And all I can say to you is a tour guide. What do you think about that? If you walk through Cecil Court, for example, Cecil Court is lit because the whole thing about Covent Garden is that everywhere you go, there's light coming in from shops and restaurants and offices, isn't there? In the case where you might have a very small, gloomy passageway, and Crown Passage, I think, is a good example. There was the Red Lion pub down there, and the councillor said to me that they'd had, I think, 5 complaints in 3 years. And, that's because it's a dark passageway, there's a pub, and I think some people, perhaps 5 people over 3 years, didn't feel particularly safe there. But what we would say to that is put in electric light. We don't have the problem. Keep the gas light and put in extra light. Why remove all the gas lights in Westminster because of three problem spots, But to assume that there are these sort of safety problems all over Westminster because of the gas lights is just absurd. I mean, you walk down Tavistock Street by the Drury Lane Theatre, which I photographed the other day, and I put a film up on Instagram of it. Again, actually, people go and look at my film and make your own mind up. I mean, what we're saying, so, we're reasonable people. So we're saying, like, for example, in the Crown Passage incident, where there may have been some problems because there was a pub there and, whatever. But we just said, well, add extra lighting. Just put in spotlights, put in extra light, but don't remove the gas lights. I was then told by the council, we can't do that because of planning, because of listed buildings. So I said, well, that's just absurd. I mean, I know the listed buildings in the gas lamp area. I've gone through them very, very closely, and I've got a pretty good idea where the listed buildings are. They're dotted here and there. But then, for example, in Crown Passage, you've got Quebec House on either side. Which is not listed, so there's no reason why a lamp couldn't have gone up there. No, I just think it's an excuse. I really do. It's just not good enough, to be honest with you. I just don't think it's a genuine reason. And I say if there are problems, then obviously add electric lights, but don't rip out, for example, Cecil Court. I mean, it's just perfectly well lit. Tourists love it. People come there. As you know, I've spent an afternoon in Tim Breyer's bookshop, having a nice glass of wine, and every 5 minutes, Americans come in, Canadians, Germans, who just love it, and they've come to soak up the atmosphere. We've told them, by the way, the council wants to remove that gas lamp, and they're just like horrified.
Yeah. So what can we do to save the gas lamps?
Well, I hope I've given you a sort of idea of what's going on. So we won a reprieve a year ago. So we're now, I'm afraid, in the final stages of the whole thing. We have the next consultation is going to be on Thursday. There'll be 3 consultations where, again, I must stress the council are only showing. It's not really a proper consultation. There's no option to keep the old gas lamps. It's merely a consultation to come and look at our new lovely replicas. And that's on Thursday. And then the public have up until November the 20th to get their views across to the council. And then I think the council will make a decision. You will need to check with the council, but I believe there is going to be a vote on it. Our plan as a group, obviously, we want to is to get lots of public support and get people to get in contact with the council directly and just tell them their views and say, we are very, very unhappy about this, and we are about to lose a really important part of London's history. And once it's gone, you won't be able to get it back again. That's it.
Okay, well, I'll provide all the links necessary in the show notes for the podcast. Well, hopefully you've whetted people's appetites now and given them a cause for getting into action here. So, Luke, thank you very, very much.
Not at all. Thank you very much for having me.